Good day to everyone tuning in from the nation of Fiji. This is the latest on Cyclone Evan from 28storms.com/cyclone. The Joint Typhoon Warning Center of the United States will be issuing another advisory on Cyclone Evan within the next hour and a half, but as of the making of this video, Advisory 13 is still the latest advisory, and at this time, maximum sustained winds are still 90 knots. That is a slight weakening compared to 24 hours ago. However, as we will show you in just a second, it looks as though the storm may be starting to organize once again. Based on their latest forecast track, the center of circulation will remain just to the north and just to the west of Fiji. However, interests all across this region can still anticipate very strong winds and the threat of heavy rainfall in the southeast quadrant of the storm. You can also expect gale force winds to begin moving in later tonight, so you want to make those final preparations now before we lose the daylight hours. Additionally, the latest information from the Fiji Meteorological Services has already designated Evan as a Category 4 cyclone, and the good news is that the track is in very close agreement with what we just saw from the JTWC. They are also keeping the center of the circulation just to the north and just to the west of the country. However, as we already stated, interests all across these islands are still going to be impacted by very significant weather. The government of Fiji has already taken preemptive measures to protect their public and citizens from the storm, and a list of evacuation shelters has been posted online. You can also find this listing on our website. Once again, it's at 28storms.com/cyclone, and we will also post it to our Facebook and Twitter accounts. Today's visible satellite animation is just becoming available, but you can still make out that we still have a very well-defined tropical cyclone, and as we switch to the enhanced infrared, this tells us where the strongest convection and thunderstorm activity is located, and it looks like we're dealing with another burst of convection near the center of circulation, so this is the first indicator that we could be seeing another round of strengthening already underway. And as we turn to the rainbow color infrared loop, this gives us a little bit more detailed and higher resolution, and you can make out that the center of circulation appears to be directly within that cloud canopy, so that's another sign that we are still dealing with a very healthy and strengthening storm. Furthermore, within the last 90 minutes, we've received an updated microwave satellite image, and we can see here that the storm does in fact have a rather small and well-defined eye, so I would expect that the 90 knot sustained winds being indicated by the latest JTWC advisory are going to slowly creep upward here within the next advisory, and potentially even more strengthening may occur later on this afternoon into the evening hours. Also, it should be noted that we do not have the luxury of using Hurricane Hunter aircraft to fly into the storm and take measurements, so all of the intensity estimates that we are talking about are based on structural changes on satellite imagery, and there is a satellite estimation scale. We call that the Dvorak scale, and basically the higher that these three numbers are, the stronger the storm usually is. And you can see with the latest update compared to some of the more recent ones right above it, we now have values across the board of 5.5, which is indicative of around 110 knots. So I would expect the 90 knots once again that we saw on advisory number 13 from the JTWC to be at least 100 knots in their upcoming outlook or advisory. You may also notice that the estimated minimum central surface pressure has been lowered from 954 hectopascals to 941. So why are we looking at a potential new round of intensification? Well, if you recall in the previous video, the favorable upper level ridge that was once ventilating the storm became displaced to the south and east of where the tropical cyclone is located. But within the latest updated graphic from the University of Wisconsin, it looks as though that this upper level ridge is starting to spread back over the tropical cyclone, which is situated just to its west. And as we turn on the color representation of the wind shear values, again, the darker shaded values are more favorable with the wind shear less than 5 to 10 knots, and those lower values are spreading closer to where the estimated center of the cyclone is positioned. As we turn to the regional water vapor animation, we can see that we have a very strong trough immediately to the west of the tropical cyclone, and eventually this is the same trough that is going to turn the storm more toward the south, and it's also going to help rip apart the storm once it passes to the southwest of Fiji, because those winds from the northwest and the mid to upper layers of the atmosphere will help to make the storm more disorganized with time. But before that, it's going to enhance this outflow channel that you see screaming toward the South Pole, and that is helping to ventilate the storm, and we have a favorable upper level ridge currently moving back over the system. So within the next 12 to 24 hours, we can anticipate potentially more strengthening before the storm begins to weaken down the road within the next 1 to 3 days. This is the latest model forecast from the American GFS, and as we look forward into 24 hours, you can see the center of circulation passing very close to Vanuatu with the eye just to the northwest of those locations, you're going to have very strong northerly winds starting to work its way into the coastline. And all northern and western coastal locations, if you happen to be in an area that is vulnerable to coastal water level rise and storm surge, you may want to go ahead and take advantage of those evacuation shelters that have been listed, because that is where the strongest surge values and the highest winds are going to be. Now, as we fast forward into 36 hours, you can also see that the center of circulation at this time will be making its closest approach to VT Levu. So again, this entire area is going to be facing some pretty strong northerly and northeasterly winds, so you want to take action now before these stronger winds begin to move in. Also, this is a look at the 24-hour forecast from the European ECMWF model, and as you can see, the forecast over the next 24 and 48 hours from both of these models are rather close to one another now. So this is a high confidence forecast with the center passing very close to the islands. But due to the small margin of error here, with the center passing so close to the coastline, any deviation toward the east would almost guarantee that those coastal locations would receive the maximum sustained winds that this storm has to offer. So this is certainly a threat that you do not want to dismiss. Take the action now while you can here over the next 6 to 12 hours. As we return to the zoomed in imagery for just a quick moment, I want to show how close the storm now is in relation to Fiji. You can see some of the stronger convection now just offshore, and we already have some bands of periodically heavy rainfall spreading over the islands. So again, the next 6 hours is pretty much the only time you have left to make those final preps. And finally, before we wrap up this afternoon's video, I would like to take note of the latest 12Z run of the ECMWF model, because at this time yesterday there was still a lot of model disagreement regarding the forecast beyond days 3 and 4 with regard to Tropical Cyclone Evan. So as we look at the latest European model, we can still see the trough anchored out across the Coral Sea, and we have the ridge temporarily still to the south of Fiji. But as we go into 24 and 48 hours, the ridging is starting to weaken, and that is why we are expecting more and more of a gradual turn toward the south by the tropical cyclone. As we go into day 3 and day 4, you can see that the ridging has pretty much fallen apart, and we still have a little in the way of pronounced troughing to the east of Queensland, Australia. And as we head into days 5 and 6, the ECMWF model is now more in line with the GFS model's expectations by continuing to take this storm toward the south. If you recall, in yesterday's video at this time, the European was showing the remnants of the cyclone pushing closer toward northern Australia and the northern section of the Coral Sea. However, it now looks as though that the trough will fully capture the storm, so we don't have to worry about any remnants moving to the west of New Caledonia. Instead, it looks as though the remnants of this storm could slide into New Zealand as it begins to acquire more in the way of non-tropical mid-latitude system characteristics. But still, if it passes directly over New Zealand, there could be some severe weather, so that'll be something else that we will take a closer look at in a few days. But this certainly would not still be a tropical cyclone once it moves that far to the south. So that wraps up today's update. If anything significant changes, we will post another video sometime later this evening. And always keep it tuned at 28storms.com/cyclone so that you do not miss any of our updates. And also, please continue to take note of the official advisories being released by the Fiji Meteorological Services.